Coming up next, our first workshop session of the day will be focused on pacing. In this session, we'll have a voice to share experiences and learn collaboratively. This workshop will actually be delivered in partnership with FisioCamera. It's set up with an animated intro, and then you'll proceed to breakout rooms with a speaker, moderator, and scribe. And then you'll come all the way back to the main room, where the scribes will help summarize the rooms. Now, by the time this session is over, you'll be able to accurately describe, teach, and translate knowledge on symptom contingent pacing, and you'll be able to understand pacing from the lived experiences of people living with long COVID, as well as strategies for effective implementation. Excited to bring in our group led by Dr. Vogel, Professor Jason, Dr. Bull, and Professor Davenport, who is pulling double duty. Let's get him in here. As well as Laura. And there she is.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Jimmy.
If our speakers could turn on their cameras, we can add you.
There we go.
Shall I share the screen already?
Yes, please.
Or shall we introduce the speakers?
I say share away, Laura.
Okay. Can you see it?
We can now.
Perfect.
I think Lenny's planning to kick us off. I don't know if he was able to get off mute. We all had a little trouble with that for a minute.
I am. Thank you. Pacing is basically what patients with ME/CFS and long COVID often engage in. It involves encouraging individuals to be as active as possible within the limits imposed by their illness. Patients are instructed to ignore symptoms that do not make them feel unwell. However, patients are instructed to either rest when more serious symptoms occur, indicating that their limits have been exceeded. So, for example, having onset of muscle weakness, dizziness, or flu-like symptoms.
You know, pacing involves a balancing act, and trying to stay within that envelope of one's symptoms and their capabilities at any one point involves a balancing act of appropriate resting, but also doing as many life functions as possible. The need to rest doesn't stop life. There's bathing and cooking at the most basic level. There's also household upkeep. There's family and social commitments, intimate relationships. All of those often work in opposition with the ability to pace. And that these demands of life, are present, of course, on an interpersonal level and sort of at a community level, but we also have a society that is not amenable to rest. Too much resting is considered laziness, personality flaw, moral failing, because it runs counter to our sort of Eurocentric societal expectations about being industrious and being productive. And many of our health and our work policies are not set up to accommodate for pacing. And so it's important to realize that even outside of the interpersonal sphere and the community sphere, we have a lot of societal barriers in the way of political and legal and sort of social, cultural barriers for patients to be able to pace. So while people may understand about pacing, may get that pacing is important, may understand the physiological basis that we touched on in the previous science session just a little bit, they may have the know-how. It may not be possible to pace in all solutions. And so when patients don't pace, they do tend to play this yo-yo game where folks rest until they feel just better enough, and then go do the things that they need to do, and then have to rest, plus or minus a crash, recovering from a crash. Maybe they've expended all of their energy to get the things done that never stopped while they were resting, only to collapse or to relapse, and then to continue on this roller coaster, this cycle that reoccurs again and again.
All right, should we introduce our breakout sessions next?
Do you want to go first, Julia? I think we're freestyling the order a bit, aren't we?
Sure. No, that's fine. So together with Todd, I'll be co-leading a session on using technology to pace, which there was a lot of discussion about already in the chat, which is awesome. So just to introduce myself, I'm a long COVID patient researcher at Scripps Research, which is in the United States. We're really excited to have this discussion about using wearables to pace. The idea is that you have these metrics from different devices, such as heart rate variability, activity levels, stress levels, sleep levels, and even combinations of that information. And you can get it in real time, measurements from your body to help supplement what you already are feeling and experiencing. And this is on the screen an example of some of my personal screenshots from different information that I've used from the Garmin device that I have. So this can be really helpful to inform, what the daily decisions that you have to make about, can I wash the dishes tonight? Can I go to that social event, by having this real-time information? And one reason that I'm so excited about this conversation is that as a person living with long COVID, using a wearable to pace has been the most helpful thing for me in over 2 years of trying different supplements and medications and strategies. And before I got the wearable, I actually thought I was pacing. I had read a lot of information and understood I needed to cut back from my pre-COVID life. But once I had the data in front of me, I learned more about what a terrible job I was doing to pace, and I had to cut back a lot more actually to stay within my energy envelope. So I'm really excited to hear about others experiencing using wearables to pace, and just to be able to talk directly with all of you. So Michelle, do you want to go next and talk about your session?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to pick up on cognitive pacing. And I think one of the things that I've found, I'm one of the physios for ME, so I've been working with post-exertional malaise and symptoms for a while, even before COVID. And I think people find that cognitive activities, it's a surprise that they can cause PEM. And so even basic things like when people think they're resting, watching TV, reading a book, they're actually maybe not as restful as people may have initially perceived. But then other things like driving, socializing, those are all cognitive challenges. So I think we've had some conversations around perhaps more physical approach to pacing. And so going to pick up some of the broader cognitive challenges in the breakout room that I'm hosting. And I'm really excited, like Julia, to learn from other people's experiences, because I've had to learn a lot. And we've certainly, as Physios for ME, we've picked up a lot from people who are teaching us as we go, really. I think the other thing that I'm going to reiterate, which probably then needs nicely into Lenny to be able to do his update, is that we can't look at any of these things in isolation. We have to look at the whole energy envelope when we're pacing, and then links back to Todd's comments around how we weigh up all those demands on to do pacing. So we're going to look at how to do some cognitive pacing, how to rest, strategies that people may have found that have worked. And yes, somebody's just put in the chat, we need to discuss rest as much as activity, 100%. So we'll pick some of that up. So Lenny, do you want to talk a bit about what's in your breakout?
Sure, thank you. What was asked by one of the people on the message board is post-exertional malaise. And post-exertional malaise does occur the same amounts with people with ME/CFS and long COVID. It's fascinating. And we have data from hundreds of people that we've looked at. So this is a very comparable, it's critical, sometimes the most important symptom. So what we're going to be thinking about is, how does pacing help you with post-exertional malaise to reduce it, hopefully to reduce it tremendously. And why did we come up with this idea of energy envelope? For those of you who don't know it, actually a patient suggested it in 1993, goes back that far, and said, that's what you should call it. So we're just using something that a patient came up with, and we'll talk more about that particular issue of why do we do it? Why is it so different from what's occurring in too many settings where people are being pushed and pushed and pushed?
All right, so maybe we can get the breakouts started. And I want to be in all three too. It's very upsetting not to be able to be in all three, but that's life. So we'll do report outs at the end, so you can at least hear the highlights of all of the breakouts. So can we all choose rooms?
So what's going to happen now is, hopefully on your screens, there will be some breakout room options to choose from. So you will see in the chat box what the three different rooms are. So room 1 is how to pace and best pacing practices with Prof Jason. Room 2 is cognitive pacing with Michelle. Room 3 is technology and pacing with Julia and Todd. So hopefully our tech team are going to get you some options coming up now, so you can choose your breakout rooms. Bear with us. We're doing our best. We're going to get it up as soon as we can. Hopefully Laura will be coming to join us as well, and then we'll have our scribes from each room. So we know that people are slowly coming back from the breakout rooms, the joy of technology, but hopefully for those of you that are in here, in this room right now, it was an opportunity for everybody to have a voice. And that is something that us at Long COVID Physio feel is critical and important. And we do know that even though technology is great, Zoom sometimes doesn't mean that we all get a voice. So I know this may have not been as smooth as we may want, but I hope it's working so that everybody had the chance to talk, share, and learn together. The purpose of these workshops is to break down those hierarchies of knowledge and power, make sure that everybody has the chance to speak. Because when it comes to things like pacing, we all have our own personal lived experiences, our clinical experiences and research experiences, and therefore nobody knows better than anybody else. We can all bring something to the table. Now we're looking like we've got over 340 people back in the room, so I think we might nearly be here. So I might ask our tech team if we can make Laura a co-host, so that we can bring her on and she can share her screen. I believe also we need our workshop team. So we have Helen, Linda, Mary and Jessica. I hope that might come and join us. And I think it was Linda and Jessica that were scribes in your room. Because we're going to now share the summaries of each of those sessions. So we're going to start with group number 1, which I think is Linda.
Hi there. So our room was with Lenny, and we talked about how best to pace and best practices. It was a really nice interactive group, and we had a lot of feedback. I'm just going to read it out because I can't remember things very well these days. So pacing is not often understood by health professionals was a key theme, and it's quite a new tool in the healthcare professionals toolkit. There was a theme of graded exercise therapy still being pushed as a way to pace in some places. And so we need to educate. The avoidance of activity is not the normal style of treatment, and it's hard to change away from that. Exercise is the answer. Patients often start with a yo-yo effect, and so learning that boom-bust effect of doing too much on good days to keep up with everything, then crashing, doesn't work. Learning what's appropriate advice that's given to you by family, friends, and healthcare professionals is important. And put yourself first, prioritize yourself, advocate for yourself when planning and accepting help and support. You're the most important person in this, and take care of yourself. Listen to your body, and you shouldn't push through those feelings of fatigue like you may have done previously. And you are responsible for you, and be kind to yourself while you learn how to adapt to it. It's a journey. This reduced battery means you need to recognize you can't do everything you used to do and ask for help. Check in with yourself each morning, ready for the day ahead to manage that day better, because every day is different. You can still be there for your family, but accept it's different in a different sense. You can be present with family with clear boundaries of what you can manage. Prioritize tasks and accept your battery is reduced, and you can do less before you rest. And use adaptations and things to help you, like stools in a shower or walking aids or wheelchairs, and using heart rate monitoring. And prioritize and plan. And then the most important thing, rest. So regular resting and sleeping through the day to top up your energy battery. Rest is different for everyone. Do things that make you happy, and finding a calm within the crazy, no matter what it is. That's my feedback.
Wonderful. Thank you, Linda. That was a fantastic scribing summary. Wow. I know I've got to match up to that now. So, Jessica,
No
what
pressure.
about you? No pressure at all. Jessica, do you match up to that?
Well, what's really interesting, so our breakout room was on cognitive pacing of how many similarities. So I'm going to repeat a lot of what Linda has just said. One of the things, though, that came up was how often people are surprised that cognitive tasks can cause post-exertional malaise or post-exertional symptom exacerbation. So sitting at your desk or computer and then feeling worse after, but I haven't done anything today. And so in that sense, it's very hard to monitor cognitive loads, and pacing for it then becomes difficult because you haven't done anything, quote unquote. So some of the things that might come in handy are monitoring heart rate variability, could show some cognitive load or stress. Journaling is probably also very helpful. So you're writing down how much time you're spending on cognitive tasks during the day, and then what you're feeling at the end of the day or the next day to see if you can find some trends. But if we're looking to pace cognitively, it's the same as what we're going to do for physical pacing. So you're planning, you're prioritizing, you're chunking up those activities. So breaking things up, looking at, is there a better time of day for you to be doing cognitive tasks? And then one of the things was that doing nothing can be really hard cognitively. So it could be boring. Or on the flip side, the brain doesn't turn off when you are, quote unquote, resting. So finding techniques that might help. Maybe it's mindfulness techniques. Maybe for some, it is reading something light. Or some people have been saying, well, I can do video games. That's okay, but I can't do other things. So that leads into the heterogeneity. I can never say that word. The individual response to cognitive loads. Some people find this restful. Some people find that the most challenging thing they could do. So, it is a little bit of, we talked about this, Michelle, trial and error when we're dealing with cognitive loads. Switching tasks to reduce overexertion, that's kind of part of that chunking. Changing positions. So maybe reclining or lying down versus upright to do those will allow you to have a more successful session with cognitive loads. Changing things like the sensory input. So does that mean changing the background color of your screen, turning it down a little bit, using blue light filters or blue light glasses, having warm lighting, using earplugs or white noise or brown noise, whatever seems to work for you. Again, this is trial and error. Here are some things to try. And then one of the biggest things that Linda just talked about, but we really reiterated, was the importance of good quality rest. And not "Oh, I have to go and rest." But, oh, I've done something. It's time for me to take my medicine, which is I'm going to have some good quality rest, whether you're using mindfulness techniques, whether it means reading a book that you enjoy or having a podcast on or whatever, but that rest, acceptance of the need for pacing and the need for rest, and making it good quality rest as well. It's not going to be very helpful if you're hating it, which is really hard. That, none of this is delivered flippantly, and none of this is delivered with all you have to do is. We recognize all of this stuff is extremely challenging.
Thank you, Jessica. Wow. So another amazing summary. And not necessarily just the same there. There were lots of specifics there to the cognitive pacing. So thank you for that incredible scriber's summary. So I was scribing in the pacing and tech room. And this was actually really different to what you guys have described, because actually one of the things that really came up is that technology that's available is often designed and made for a healthy world. And so when you're living with a disability, maybe it doesn't really match what you need. And we do know that there is more to talk about that later. And so there were people that were just sharing examples of feeling unregulated and how the algorithms of the tech weren't necessarily actually aligning with their experiences, and maybe they had delayed symptom onset, and so therefore it didn't pick up the things at the right time. And so it can just be really difficult to navigate how the tech does support your pacing sometimes. But then what was also mentioned is that there are some examples where it can be used successfully. And one of the things was that technology shouldn't actually replace how you feel. You should listen to your body, and the technology can give you insights and may even give you some insights into predicting future problems as well, such as post-exertional symptom exacerbation. So some stories were shared about successful heart rate monitoring and how that relates to maybe some other biomarkers. So particularly lactate was mentioned. And obviously we know that some of the heart rate monitoring that is used does use certain calculations based on some of those lactate-based anaerobic or aerobic threshold that have been published before. Heart rate monitoring can also be really useful during those times when you've crashed, because it gives you an indication as to where you are. And there was conversations about maybe not obsessing with the numbers, and then maybe where people like to be able to be in control and therefore will not see the word obsessing as a bad thing, because actually it enables them to gain a sense of autonomy and control over the management of their symptoms and also the predictability of future crashes. So therefore technology is often used as a guide, and it's not that you have to stick to thresholds, because what was also discussed is people were finding their own thresholds. So some people were suggesting that maybe they could do more than what their threshold might be, or less, in terms of managing how their symptom management, their pacing, their balance of activities and rest is being used, particularly to avoid crashes. Another thing that was particularly discussed was the challenge that is faced in terms of the global recognition of long COVID. So there was one particular example given from South America region in Mexico, where if the healthcare professionals are invalidating you or minimizing your long COVID experience, they're also not there to help you or guide you through pacing and through the use of technology. So where do you look to? Where do you get that advice? How do you get the support? And often that is from other people living with similar healthcare conditions or energy limiting healthcare conditions, whether that be people living with long COVID, people with ME, and other groups that live with energy limiting healthcare conditions. It's finding the people that can help. There was a really useful distinction between heart rate monitoring and heart rate variability. So heart rate monitoring being an opportunity to kind of do the minute-to-minute monitoring of your activities. And whereas heart rate variability may be an overall picture of your autonomic loading, which is part of your nervous system that may be off kilter. And with both of these different things, it provides you with tools. And that's the most important thing. It's having the tools of how we do things more successfully to pace our activities, manage our symptoms, and avoid symptom flare-ups and crashes. The concept of biofeedback was brought up more than once in terms of how technology can be used to provide us with that biofeedback to manage pacing. And an analogy was given to other healthcare groups that do similar things, such as people living with diabetes. What became really clear is that sometimes patients may know more than some clinicians. That's not to minimise the clinicians in the room who are learning with all of us at the same time. But what was clear is that the people that are living with these energy limiting healthcare conditions are living it 24 hours a day and navigating the use of technology day in, day out, and so often have been learning continuously and have a wealth of experience because of that. So what I might do then is I might come back to our speakers, Todd, Julia, Michelle and Len. I'm going to allow you guys to sum up. You've got a couple of minutes. Where do you want to go with this?
Okay, I'll kick off soon and then everybody else can then follow up. So I think for me, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to everybody who contributed, because I think actually, as you've just said, Darren, we all have a certain amount of knowledge, but it's so individual, and actually it's almost about how do we collect our big toolbox of things and then help people work out which is the best toolbox for them, and we shouldn't be seen as having all the answers totally. I think the bit that really resonated for me was that actually cognitive pacing, physical pacing, using a heart rate monitor, it's all about that overall energy envelope, to bring it right back to where Lenny started from, that actually what is our energy envelope and how do we identify all the pieces of the energy envelope, and then how do we work out the best way of supporting ourselves from there. So Lenny is here, so to somebody in the chat, so that for me is just like it summed up beautifully everything that I've sort of learned and still learning. So thank you for inviting me to be part of today.
Thank you, Michelle. Lenny, what's your 30-second take home?
So you're on a very difficult journey. You're going to get lots of bad advice. You're going to basically be subjected to all types of trauma that you've had, and then re-trauma from the system. So you have to basically trust yourself. You have to basically be able to realize that you're the ones who's going to probably come up with the answers. You're going to have people that are going to help you, but you really need to sort of say to yourself, you're in charge. This is your journey, nobody else's.
Wise words. I'll just add to that, one of the questions that we had prepared in advance, but I think none of us got to, were what research is needed on pacing. And so, for me, particularly in the wearables area, my group is trying to work on this, but I think there's a real need to publish everything that's been learned in the patient community so that we can get it out to the clinician community as well, so that we can really disseminate those lessons learned. So that's something I'm really excited about going forward.
Todd, you get the last 30 seconds.
No pressure. I can't keep myself to 30 seconds and I'm going last. My gosh, how am I supposed to build on this? But to say thank you all for the opportunity to be part of your journey, to learn from it, to add to it in a collaborative spirit. So again, I go forward with a lot of gratitude for being involved in this forum and wish everyone the best of luck and health.
Thank you all for all of your contributions, and that's everybody that was in every breakout room, speakers, scribes, moderators, and everyone in between. We will be ending this session now. As you may have been aware, only part of this session has been recorded, the introduction and the summary. Breakout rooms have not been recorded. That is to maintain your confidentiality, dignity, and respect. But all of the summaries that have been shared now will be put on the Padlet. So if you want them, head to the Padlet and go and grab them whenever you're ready.